Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Vampires. That's right, 2 vampire videos in 1 week. Aren't you lucky? This video is dedicated once again to ranking the Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. And you know what? Now that we're on to the T's, I think we may actually finish with this video. Now, I know a few of you have asked things like, I want you to rank the Werewolf the Apocalypse tribes, I want you to do the Vampire the Requiem Bloodlines. Yes, I've had the request to do the Forgotten Realms deities. Among other things, people seem to have been very excited with the idea of ranking videos. Who knew they were clickbait? I did. I've mentioned in the past few videos, but I'm going to mention it again here. If there are videos you want in particular, you do need to you need to do one of these 3 things. Either pick up a copy of The World Below or They Came from the RPG Anthology and send me an email through MatthewDawkins.com with your video request. I will add it to the tally. Or simply pay me. I mean, go on MatthewDawkins.com, there's a PayPal link there, drop me some dollary dues and your video request, and I will strongly consider it. I will generally do it unless it's something absolutely obscene. Or back my Patreon. My Patreon is patreon.com/MatthewDawkins. Support me regularly and get in on the train of requesting videos regularly. As you can see, there is no end to this series of videos. I am doing videos every weekday now, and I'm more than happy to continue doing so. So requests are necessary, but I would love for you to give me any support that you can. So without any further ado, let's see where we got to. Okay, I'm moving over to this corner again, as is tradition, to look at... Okay, so we got to the Samedi. Okay, it was the Samedi last time, and the Samedi were classified as antediluvians. Did you like the way I just pretended I could actually see the image that appeared next to me? After the Samedi is the tal'mahe'ra tremere. I'm sure I pronounced that incorrectly. So the tal'mahe'ra tremere are your pagan Lithuanian-Polish tremere who worship a demon, an earthbound demon, quite possibly, and were wiped out in the Dark Ages. What do I have to say about them? Well, one, I really like the idea of the tal'mahe'ra tremere because they completely break from the mould of the tremere as they tend to be presented. They are not your standard organised hierarchy of blood magi, so I do like that a lot. I also enjoy how important they are to the Dark Ages clan novels. If you've not read the Dark Ages clan novels, I would argue they are considerably better than the Masquerade clan novels. There are still some weak ones in there, but the plot surrounding the tal'mahe'ra tremere is really quite interesting and does have a certain resonance throughout the entire Dark Ages setting. It establishes things like why the Ventrue are as important and powerful as they are in Dark Ages Vampire, and also forms some of the foundation of the relationship between the Ventrue and the tremere. So I like that they are there as, I guess, almost a sacrificial lamb to the eventual progress of Clan Tremere. I also like where they occupy in Europe. That's not to say I know Poland and Lithuania terribly well. I've only been to Poland once, and I've not been to Lithuania, but, give it time. But it isn't a part of the map that is often explored in Vampire the Masquerade, which often has a North American and Western European focus. So I like that there is some explanation or exploration there with the tal'mahe'ra tremere. There are negatives, however. Actually, you know what? One more positive. I enjoy their weakness. I mean, it's obviously very Bali in nature. They suffer horrendous damage from holy symbols, and therefore we are staking them as fairly, well, maybe not infernalists, but they are from an ancient time, pre-Christian. Okay. Which is odd, I know, for the tremere, but that's the kind of people who were embraced into the tal'mahe'ra tremere, so what are you going to do? The negatives. They are destroyed by the modern era. I know there have been several cases, I think in Mind's Eye Theatre, I don't think we ever referenced them in V5. We may have done. But I don't think we did, unless it was in a book that came out after my tenure on the game ended. But they are restricted to a certain era. Now, there have been several bloodlines in this video series that are most appropriate to one era, like the Ander being very Dark Ages centric. But I think that the tal'mahe'ra tremere would really struggle in the modern era. I guess you could have them as demon worshipping tremere, but I think even the demon that they are worshipping is basically destroyed in the Dark Ages from memory, so it doesn't really work as a bloodline that can transition into the modern era, which is fine if you just want to run a Dark Ages game. And I mean, if you want them to switch to a different Infernal Master, you can turn them into Barley. But I think I'm going to have to land on Ancilla for the tal'mahe'ra tremere. I don't think they have enough going on for them to outlast the Dark Ages, and they are very centric to a specific region. There is little reason for them to leave the demon that they worship. So there we go. On to the tlacique. Our Mesoamerican, or maybe even Central, Aztec, potentially even Mayan, I don't know, it's very muddy, followers of Set bloodline, which has never received a great deal of depth, though I made an effort to ensure that one of the V20 ready-made characters, which is a book I think I still have somewhere, maybe, among the very few. Yes, I do. Every clan was represented in that book, except for the Setites, because the Setite that's in there is a tlacique. And the reason I put him in there is because I don't think there had been any statted up tlaciques until now, until then, I suppose. And I gave them a little more depth in Beckett's Jihad Diary with the Drowned Legacies. I mentioned them in another video, that I basically created them more or less for V20, and they've received a few mentions in V5 here and there. But the tlacique, the reason I like them, the reason I enjoy the concept is, one, I'm a big hound for Aztec and Mayan, and to a degree Incan mythology. I love all of that stuff. I love reading about it. I would love to get out there someday and actually explore some of that. So there's that aspect. But there is also the side of things that it basically blows open the idea of the Cainite mythos, which I've mentioned before and I will say again. I'm not that keen on there being a monomyth for the origins of vampires in Vampire the Masquerade. And while that wasn't the case in first edition, by second edition, the Cainite myth basically got picked up halfway through second edition and accepted as fact, to the point that come revised edition, even fifth edition, there really isn't much debate that Cain was the first vampire, Enoch was the city of vampires, and so on and so forth. The tlacique and other oddities existed before the Drowned Legacies were introduced, such as the Pisanob, the, I guess, Cappadocian maybe, of Poshtli, some interesting vampires who were introduced in early vampire products, like Huitzilopochtli, I think, was one of them, maybe. There was certainly a dungeon, what was it, Diablerie Mexico, not a very good book by any means, but it introduced the idea of ancient Mesoamerican vampires that, you know, you could potentially say, well, this vampire crossed the Atlantic, and yeah, no, I don't think so. I like the idea of expanding the mythos. It appeals to me on a huge number of levels, and the tlacique are a very good way of presenting a bloodline and saying everything you believe may not actually be true. Doubly fun by the fact that they are Setites who constantly maintain that the things the other clans believe are not true. But, again, negatives. There just isn't enough about them to rank them higher than Ancilla. I would love to do it. I would love to see the tlacique receive a little more coverage, but I don't think it's going to happen. and it never happened in any previous editions of Vampire. Maybe if I had my way, I would have done more with them, but I think introducing them to the degree I did in things like V20 ready-made characters, and then with the Drowned Legacies again, I did a bit, and it would have seemed a bit strange if there was a whole source book surrounding them. But they have no massive distinction from the followers of Set, just with a strange alternate faith to being Setites, much like the Damballa and the Daitya and the other Setite offshoots. So, Ancilla, I think they've got to be Ancilla. They are middle of the road. They have a lot of potential, but it has not been explored. So, rounding out the T's now, we have True Brujah. True Ha. Yes. You've been looking forward to the True Brujah and what I have to say about them, because they are one of the most popular bloodlines in Vampire the Masquerade. I don't think that's in any doubt, especially of a certain era. People loved the True Ha. They loved the idea of, and I know this is going to sound very reductive, time-traveling vampires. They are more than just time-traveling vampires, and in fact they aren't really time-traveling vampires. That does them disservice. What they do have is a very, very unusual discipline in the form of temporis, which isn't actually that unusual compared to things like Sanguinus, Daimonian, Mythoceria, Melpomene, and other revised edition and prior disciplines. So I guess it's not that odd. This is where you watch me suddenly realise that the True Brujah should have always been Methuselahs or Antediluvians. Okay, so here's what works in their favour. They have an established piece of metaplot about them. They are the original Brujah that Troil diablerized or just killed the first Brujah, Ilyes, or just Brujah if you like, and that the rest of the Brujah we know tonight, are Troil's childer and grandchilder and so forth. They are Troil's descendants, leaving any of the original descendants to become the True Brujah. And the idea that Ilyes was a dispassionate, cold, sociopathic vampire compared to Troil, who was attracted to Troil because of Troil's bursts of emotion, uncontrollable anger and so forth, creates a nice counterbalance. There's a nice mythological element to it. It feels apocryphal, I guess, in a fun kind of a way. So that works. I guess the Tzimisce kind of have the same thing going on with the Tzimisce and the old clan Tzimisce. The Giovanni have the same thing going on with the Giovanni and the Cappadocians. So this is where I start turning off the road and thinking, hang on, is there anything interesting about the True Brujah at all? The True Brujah also have no real... Oh, look, I'm about to talk about negatives again. So before I do, stick to the positives. They are a cool concept. Most of the reason I put the Samdi in as Antediluvians is because they're damn cool. And a lot of people think the True Brujah are cool. They love them. They love the idea of the cold, calculating vampire who can basically turn you to dust by speeding up the clock or rewind time and so forth. They love that idea. They love the idea of the secret vampire. I think that's something to note about the True Brujah, and I will get into that in the negatives. But players do enjoy that. The True Brujah have never been terribly instrumental in the metaplot stage. A couple appear in books like Cairo by Night. We had them appear in a few places in Beckett's Jihad Diary. They are in the Storyteller's Handbook, of course. They've been around for quite a while in vampire books, so I can't take that away from them. They've definitely got tenure. Like the Samdi, like the Daughters of Cacophony, like the Gargoyles, like several other bloodlines. Here's the negatives. They are ultimately a bit of a silly concept. I don't mean in the sense of there being the progenitors of the Brujah. I think that works fine. I mean, much like I complain about the La Sombra facilitating a style of play that I dislike. I think the true brujah facilitate a style of play that I dislike, and it's purely a personal decision. This is not a... With the La Sombra, I see it affecting widespread games. Almost every game I've encountered where there's a La Sombra, there's also a dickhead attached. With the true brujah, it's less that. It's more of an immaturity, and that's not to say every person who likes the true brujah is immature. But because they provide that perfect, I can't tell you what my bloodline is, so I'm going to disguise myself as a toreador. How many damn true brujah players have I seen play that concept, just so they can sabotage brujah in a game? Usually in LARPs, to be honest. It's unoriginal. I think that's what bothers me. I think the fact that nothing has really been added to them to add originality to the true brujah, whereas there are other clans and bloodlines that have evolved, and appropriately enough, the one that's stuck back in time cannot, means, with everything I've just said, I came into this thinking I'm going to really dunk on the true brujah because I've got big issues with their temporis discipline, especially at the highest levels, which is silly because no one plays with disciplines over 5 dots. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, V5 fans who complain that the disciplines don't go over 5 dots. But before you complain to me again, do check how many Vampire the Masquerade games you played where everyone was using 6 dot, 7 dot, and 8 dot disciplines, and check those discipline powers for a second and see how playable they actually are outside of very peculiar situations, he said condescendingly. I apologise for that. So, but my point of doing that is saying, well, complaining about the true brujah's discipline at high levels is unfair because most high-level discipline powers never get used. They're just there for flavour, and NPCs maybe, if at all. There's a reason they're not in V5, basically. Or at least not until time of recording. They might be in by now, I don't know. True brujah have positives and negatives, I have to admit it. There is a cool aspect to them. I think there is a cool idea to playing a cold, clinical character, and the idea of almost an anti-celerity discipline is interesting. So I'm not going to put them as discharge, and in fact I'm going to be even more generous, and I'm going to go for a third ancilla of this video. That's right, the tal'mahe'ra, tremere, tlacique, and true brujah are all ancillae. That's pretty generous, but I'll go for it. I'm going to say that, and I will weather the stones you fling at me. Vniger. Have you ever heard of them before? Yes, if you're in Mind's Eye Theatre, if you're a LARPer, you may have heard of the Vniger. I don't like them in any sense of the word. I think that they are ridiculous. The Vniger are a toreador anti-tribute bloodline. That's right, a bloodline of the anti-tribute, who use vicissitude to basically augment their beauty and horrors. They pursue various pageantries and art shows that are sadistic and cruel, and vicissitude is their means to doing so. Their founder is the sire of Madame Guille, or Madame Guillotine. Madame Guille, I suppose. Philippe Vniger. And what's more, they have, according to Mind's Eye Theatre books, been accepted into the Camarilla in recent times. I should correct myself. They don't have vicissitude as a clan discipline. They can access it without a teacher, and they still have to pay out of clan discipline costs for doing so. So there is that. But the point is that they can access vicissitude without a Zimi-Shi mentor. So what do they really do that the Toreador anti-tribute don't? They can exist in the Camarilla with vicissitude. I think that is literally it. I think that is literally the purpose of the Vniger. They are a Toreador bloodline that can use vicissitude in a Camarilla setting. That, to me, is the worst kind of design. And I say this, and I am sure that there are people who have played Vniger out there who have played them absolutely brilliantly. They played these fantastic characters, they've had wonderful stories, and they've played up their bloodline to the hilt, and it's been great fun, and using vicissitude in a camera setting hasn't been Masquerade breaching at all, and all of that. I am sure of it. But on paper, I look at this and I think, what you've done is basically create a very weak, paper-thin plot to justify access to a cool, non-camarilla discipline, which isn't on its own a bad thing, because these powers are in the game. We should be able to use them, you could argue. But I just don't find it terribly inspiring at all. Sorry, Volgear, you are Discharge. Yes, it's been a while since we've given a Discharge bloodline, but here we go. There's another one. I think the last one was the vniger, wasn't it? That was maybe a bit mean of me. Warrior Setites have no symbol, so once again, no ranking, which leaves us with our final bloodline, the woow. Woow, the salubri watcher bloodline. Okay, so the woow, there is not a huge amount to say about them. They've only really been covered in depth in V20 Dark Ages, and even then only in the core book, so it's not really much depth. They were, of course, previewed in the back of clan book Salubri. There is the idea that they are the childer of Sorlot when he headed out to Asia and encountered the Wangquei, the Kindred of the East, for the first time, and that they are the outcome. That the woow are observers, that they watch all over... they watch over all other Cainites in order to ensure that they are abiding by Sorlot's wishes, furthering the cause of the great Zaulat, Zaulat. But as playable options, I mean, they kind of symbolize the Inconnu in a Dark Ages fashion, and that's interesting. So they have that going for them. But are they playable? Is it playable to... Yes, actually, I think they are. I was going to dismiss them, and I don't think they can be completely dismissed. I think if your player is knitted into the meta plot well enough and describes what they want their character to be to the storyteller, hell, you could say this with the Volgear or the vniger or any of the other Discharge bloodlines. But if you have a strong enough idea, and let's say you want your character... No, you know what? I was about to justify it. I was about to justify why the woow work. And any bloodline can work, but what I need to talk about is what they are on paper. They are not Discharge. They are fledglings. And the reason the woow are fledglings is because they need a lot more to make them interesting. They need a lot more to make them playable and not just a curiosity. The reason I've ranked the bloodlines, the ones that I've ranked highest, is because, for me, there are a myriad of playable options from those Antediluvian and Methuselah tier bloodlines. The ones I've ranked lowest, the fledglings and the Discharge, are, to me, one note, at least on paper. Now, I can come up with ideas until the cows come home. Most of you can as well, fans of Vampire the Masquerade. You know, we are used to coming up with our own stories using the fantastic tools in the world of darkness. That's part of the point of role-playing games. But what I need, or what I desire, are hooks. Things that draw me into wanting to play one of these bloodlines. And when I look at what is on our Discharge rank for these bloodlines, and I look at, for instance, the woow, I think, there's not really anything there that I look at and think, I want to play this. There's nothing there that makes me think, oh, there's a character concept that I couldn't play with another clan with a lot more depth. Now, I could make that argument, as I say, for any number of these bloodlines, or indeed clans in the previous video that I made, but woow, I'm going to put down as fledgling. They are not Discharge, but they are fledgling. They have a kernel of an idea that I think we could expand, but which is more than can be said for the vniger and the Volgear, to be quite honest, and likewise the Ananke, who, from memory now, because it was a while ago that I recorded that part, are just serial killer Malkavians. But the woow, at least they have some grounding in metaplot, which is what is going to bump them up from discharge to fledgling. So, that's our Bloodlines done. Yes, there is still a possibility of doing an anti-tribute ranking video. Yes, there is still a possibility of doing the Libon. Yes, there is still a possibility of doing Werewolf the Apocalypse Tribes, Vampire the Requiem, Bloodlines and Clans, and all the rest. But for that to happen, you need to either pick up one of those books I mentioned at the beginning of the video, World Below Where They Came from the RPG Anthology, and message me through MatthewDawkins.com, or you need to send me some money via PayPal. You can find the link on MatthewDawkins.com, or you can support my Patreon, patreon.com/MatthewDawkins. Give me some of your precious money and put a request in with it for a specific video, and I will get back to you on how feasible that video is. Most of the time, I'm just going to say yes, and I'll do it. You know, if you're asking me to do something like read 50 Shades of Grey, I probably won't. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time for whatever the future holds.